This is Eurasia, the largest continental area on Earth, comprising all of Europe and Asia. It is home to over 70% of the human population and more than 90 countries. Yet, within this vast tapestry, one unique group stands out. 7 countries whose names end with the suffix "stan" in both their national languages and English. They are Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. These 7 countries not only have names all ending in "stan," but border each other from the Eurasian steppe all the way to the Arabian Sea. Due to this cultural and geographical proximity, these countries form a distinctive collective known as the 7 stans. Unlike their mighty neighbors, Russia, China, India, and Iran, who are constantly making global headlines, the 7 stans, with the exception of Afghanistan, are remarkably quiet and remain one of the least talked about regions in the world. Their stories untold, their struggles unseen. But they are not to be ignored, because behind those mountains, rivers, lakes, deserts, and steppes lie the answers to some of the most important questions in human civilization. It was here that the Persians exiled the Greeks, where Buddhism met Islam, and where the nomadic culture clashed with the sedentary culture. It was here that the Arabs defeated the Chinese, where the Turkic and Persian cultures intertwined, and where the Mongols committed their first massacre. It was here that millions of slaves were sold, where the Russians competed with the British, and where the most infamous Gulag was located. It was here that the first human was launched into space, where more than 400 nuclear bombs were tested, where all the failed anti-colonial fighters gathered, and where the British, Soviets, and Americans were defeated. In the 21st century, it is also where every major power tries to influence. This is the story of the 7 stans, the ultimate saga of Eurasia. To better understand this extremely complicated and controversial topic, I spent over 2 months filming and talking to people in this region. I went to Western China, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and the borders of Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, and Kyrgyzstan. The only country I didn't get to see was Pakistan. On this journey, I visited many interesting places, tried all kinds of amazing food, experienced a variety of transportation options, made a lot of good friends, and more importantly, I had a much deeper understanding of the making of the 7 stans. It was a mind-opening experience. Let's get into it. As always, let's first look at the geography. Around 50 to 55 million years ago, the Indian plate collided with the Eurasian plate. At the epicenter of this collision, the Himalayas, the highest mountain range on our planet, were born. To the northeast, the ongoing collision continued to uplift the Earth's crust, forming the vast and inhospitable Tibetan Plateau. To the northwest, the shock waves gave birth to four smaller yet equally formidable mountain ranges: the Karakoram, the Tian Shan, the Hindu Kush, and the Pamirs. In the past, I've had the opportunity to visit all four mountain chains. Years ago, I spent 2 full days, 14 hours a day, driving through the Karakoram, a road so treacherous it haunts my dreams. Let me put it this way. I've driven on some pretty bad roads in my time, but the road in Karakoram is definitely next level stuff. Endless dust storms, the thin, unforgiving air, and the constant threat of avalanches made it a journey of sheer survival. The Tian Shan, in stark contrast, is a paradise of lush pastures and crystal-clear lakes. In the early summer, as the snow melts, it becomes a vibrant tapestry of life, with Kyrgyz and Kazakh herders tending to their flocks amid blooming wildflowers. I went to see the Hindu Kush this time on the Afghan-Tajik border. With few modern roads, donkeys and motorbikes remain the primary means of transportation. Remote villages, cut off from the outside world, rely on helicopters to deliver essential supplies. I even saw one such helicopter taking off right in front of me. Finally, there is the Pamirs, where all these mountains converge. The road condition was a little better than in the Karakoram, but there were so few people that going from one city to another was extremely difficult. To get through the Pamirs, I hitchhiked twice and was lucky enough to drive the infamous Pamir Highway for about 2 hours. These towering mountains are the lifeblood of the region, feeding 4 majestic rivers: the Helmand, the Indus, the Silidalia, and the Amudarya. The Helmand and the Indus are the longest rivers of Afghanistan and Pakistan. The Silidalia and Amudarya are the lifelines of the 5 steins in Central Asia. Between Silidalia and Amudarya lies a region of profound historical significance, known as Transoxiana. As the 2 rivers journey westward, their courses are met by 2 vast deserts, the Karakum and Kizilkum, the 12th and 16th largest deserts. Beyond these arid landscapes, 2 bodies of water await: the Aral Sea and the Caspian Sea, each with a tale to tell. To the north lies the Kazakh steppe, the largest dry steppe on Earth. To the south lies the Arabian Sea, a vital artery of global trade. Among the 7 steins, Pakistan is the only country that is not landlocked. And finally, I'd like you to look at this valley, nestled at the heart of the 7 steins, surrounded by mountains and fed by rich rivers. It is home to over 13 million people, and where 3 countries converge and interpenetrate. It is the Fergana Valley, a region that will be brought up throughout this series again and again and again. And it is here that our story begins. And to talk about the Fergana Valley, we have to start with its first true master, the Persians. For centuries, the lands of the Iranian plateau have been known to the West as Persia, a name bestowed upon them by the ancient Greeks. Yet, to its own people, this land has been called Iran since at least 1000 BC. Iran is the same word as Aryan, meaning noble. The word itself is quite ancient, over 3,000 years old, but its current use is very modern. It wasn't until 1935 that the country's name was formally changed from Persia to Iran. But for the sake of clarity, I will occasionally refer to Iran and Iranians as Persia and Persians. However, it's important to remember that these are simply different names for the same concept. Persia is a land with rich cultures and friendly people. And I'm not saying this just to make a statement. The Persians, their language, their culture, and both their Islamic and pre-Islamic religions have dramatically and directly shaped almost all major civilizations. Persia's influence extends far beyond its borders. As a matter of fact, the suffix stan is a Persian word for land. So from the very beginning, literally starting with the names, the seven stans have something to do with Persia. In addition, ethnic Persian populations such as the Tajiks, Pashtuns, Pamiris, Wahis, Baluchis, and others have thrived in these lands, especially in the lower three stans. Ethnic Persians make up over 86% of the population in Tajikistan, 69% of the population in Afghanistan, and over 21% of the population in Pakistan. Altogether, more than 93.5 million residents in this region trace their heritage to Persian roots. That is more people than the entire population of Germany. But how? I mean, this was not a civilization built on the banks of a life-giving river. Far from it, the Persians started their journey on a land surrounded by vast deserts and rock mountains of the Middle East. So how did they manage to cast such a long shadow? Well, same old story. Tough land breeds tough people, and tough people make history. The Persian glory started with a remarkably tough guy who knew how to fight wars very, very well. His name was Cyrus. Cyrus was sort of a late bloomer. He succeeded his father and became a minor king of Persia in 559 BC when he was already 41 years old. But once he ascended to the throne, he moved quickly. Within 1 decade, Cyrus had conquered much of Eurasia, establishing the Achaemenid Empire, the largest empire the world had yet seen, stretching from the Aegean Sea to the Indus Valley. This vast empire is often considered the first superpower in human history. Under Persian rule, great cities flourished, royal roads connected distant lands, commerce boomed, and religions of all sorts thrived. But no matter how advanced and perfect a system seems, there are always issues to be dealt with. And the Persians encountered their biggest issue along the coast of the Aegean Sea, the Greeks. About 30 years after Cyrus died, the Greeks of Anatolia rebelled. The Persians and the Greeks fought on and off for 50 years until 449 BC, when the Persians retreated and abandoned many of their former colonies, one of which was Macedon. Well, after defeating their common enemy, the Greeks quickly started killing each other. The fight ended with the rise of Philip II, the king of Macedon. During his reign, the most deadly force in the ancient world, the invincible Macedonian phalanx, was established, and the kingdom of Macedonia, once on the fringes of the Hellenic world, came to dominate ancient Greece. After Philip II was killed, his 20-year-old son, a student of Aristotle, succeeded him and turned his kingdom into an empire. The young king was undefeated in battle and is often regarded as one of the greatest military commanders ever to walk the earth. The centuries-old Achaemenid Empire was no match for him and collapsed. He was the king of Macedon, the hegemon of the Hellenic League, the pharaoh of Egypt, and the Shah of Persia. He is the king of clubs, Alexander the Great.
And my friends, that is Sirdarya. What a beautiful river. Oh, by the way, I am currently in northern Tajikistan, in a city called Kujan. It was first founded by the Persians over 2,500 years ago, and is now the second largest city in Tajikistan. This is actually the mouth of the Fergana Valley. From here, you go to Kokand, Namagan, Andijan, Fergana. You know, the babies of Sirdarya. This region was first ruled by Persia, starting with Xerxes I, the fourth king of kings of the Persian Achaemenid Empire, and the one who fought the 300 Spartans. Not really 300, but that's not what we're discussing here. Anyway, since then, this region has been known for having a large Greek population. Because you see, whenever the Greeks in the Persian Empire rebelled or, caused any trouble, they will be sent here to the most distant segment from their homelands. I mean, it really couldn't get further than this. Beyond here is just Pamirs, Hindu Kush, and some of the highest mountains on Earth. And the exile of the Greeks went on like this for over 130 years. And the Greek villages, Greek language, Greek culture was quite common in this region, and the Persians built a city called Serapolis right here to safeguard its northern borders. But then, Alexander the Great rose to power, invaded the Persian Achaemenid Empire in 334 BC, and quickly conquered basically all of Persia by 327 BC, when he was only 25 years old. And when he turned 27, his army took Serapolis. Oh, look at this, you have to look at this. What is that? Is that a mouse or? You know what, I think I just saw a couple of swimming mice. It's bigger than mice, rats, huge rats, this big, in the river. Yeah. I didn't know they swim. Shit. Incredible creatures. Anyways, that battle was extremely bloody. The locals resisted bravely and even managed to give Alexander the Great himself a deadly blow on the head and the neck. Both he and his leading general were severely injured in that battle. And some record shows that after the Greeks took the city, they massacred everyone. Well, except for the Greek exiles. After the battle, Alexander built his own city here and named it Alexandria Ashkate, which literally means the furthest Alexandria. And the ruins of Alexandria Ashkate lie underneath this citadel behind me. This city therefore became his northeasternmost outpost. And as most other cities founded by Alexander, a group of retired and wounded veterans from his army was settled here, joining the large population of Greek exiles in the area. And that's actually why, when you walk around in Tajikistan, you will find some Greek-looking people. It's impressive, after 2,500 years, the seeds from the Mediterranean are still here. After 2,500 years. It's just incredible.
你好，
你好，你好，你好，萨拉马雷克，萨拉马雷克，你好，你好，你好。你们在哪里上的学？
我在黑狗大学学习。
哦，学就会，那中文讲的真的太好了，讲得真好。你们
学汉语在。
哦，你们多大年龄现在
19岁。
19岁。对。你们去过中国吗？还没有去过。
今年。 明年，
明年
明。年去中国学韩语，
学习韩语，去哪里？
广东，
广东那边。
对，
我知道，我去过。要学多长时间
6月
？6个月。
啊，6月，
6个月。哦。但你们已经讲得很好了，其实非常好，非常好。什么时候放假？今年？
放假了，
啊
6月，
，6月放假啊。
下个月，
然后明年去中国去学6个乐器。挺好，挺好。这边有很多中国人吗？在这边，在浦江？
可以。
有一些。
我们有一个中国老师，
哦，
他叫我林，
林啊，他是中国哪里人？
他在哪里？他
萨拉曼口，萨拉曼口。他是
觉得他上海人，
上海人。
Alexander the Great didn't enjoy a very long life though. He died on June 10th, 323 BC, at the age of 32, with no clear successor. This led to a power struggle among his generals, who divided his empire among themselves. The largest portion fell to General Seleucus I Nicator, who later founded the Seleucid Empire in 312 BC. Following a series of reconquests, Seleucus reclaimed many Greek territories in Mesopotamia and Persia. However, as he advanced towards the Indus Valley in 305 BC, Seleucus encountered fierce resistance. One year after Alexander the Great died, in 322 BC, one man rose to power in India. He freed Indian territories from Greek control and founded the Maurya Empire. His name was Chandragupta Maurya. When Seleucus brought his army to the Indus Valley in 305 BC, Chandragupta already had a powerful army and was dominating India. The two leaders fought for 2 years and Seleucus was defeated. He surrendered 3 easternmost provinces and formed a marriage alliance with Chandragupta. Following this, the Seleucid Empire turned its attention to other rivals in the west and gradually lost control over its eastern territories over the next 50 years. In contrast, the Maurya Empire continued to expand, reaching its largest territorial extent by 261 BC after Chandragupta's grandson Ashoka conquered Kalinga. That year, Ashoka turned 43 years old. He was a ruthless conqueror and had been campaigning all over India for decades. Ashoka was no stranger to atrocities and destruction, but this conquest of Kalinga was unlike any of his previous wars. It was a bit too bloody. Hundreds of thousands of men were killed, women were raped, and children were enslaved. The once magnificent cities in Kalinga lay in ruins. Ashoka, usually unaffected by such scenes, malfunctioned this time and was deeply troubled by the suffering he had caused. This experience led to a profound transformation as he renounced violence and embraced a path of peace and compassion. And by sheer luck or by divine design, Ashoka found his way to Buddhism. It was a religion based on the teachings of another prince from another time, Siddhartha Gautama, aka the Buddha. The chemistry between these two princes, hundreds of years apart, would have a lasting impact on human civilization. Inspired by the teachings of the Buddha, Ashoka adopted Buddhism as his faith. Under his patronage, Buddhism flourished in the Maurya Empire. A Buddhist council was convened, sutras were edited and transcribed, and one very important decision was made: to spread Buddhism to the world. Ashoka then sent 9 Buddhist missions to 9 regions. Some of these missions, like the ones sent to the south and east, were extremely successful. Even today, in countries like Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and Thailand, the presence of Buddhism is evident in every corner of society. But in terms of the number of total conversions, the mission to the north in the Kashmir and Gandhara regions was the most successful, because it was this mission that ultimately turned China into the largest Buddhist country. However, the successful transmission of Buddhism to China was the result of teamwork. Ashoka certainly played a key role in this, but so did the Greeks. As mentioned earlier, Central Asia had a long history of Greek immigration. They have been systematically moved here since at least 522 BC. Over the years, the Greeks built dozens of cities in the region. Some were built by Alexander himself, while others were built by other Greek rulers. The Greek population here was quite diverse, coming from different corners of the Mediterranean. There were North African Greeks, the Anatolian Greeks, the Cyprus Greeks, and Greeks from the Greek peninsula itself. Some had been exiled by the Persians, some had been left behind by Alexander the Great, and some had been relocated by the rulers of the Seleucid Empire. Back in the Mediterranean, they belonged to different city-states, each with its own distinct cultures and traditions. Now, in this new settlement, thousands of miles from home, these Greeks found themselves interacting with fellow Greeks from different city-states and even different times, with completely different memories of Greece. For these Greeks and their descendants, Central Asia was like a mixer plus a time machine. In this melting pot of cultures, they forged a unique Eastern Greek identity, a blend of the Hellenic heritage and the influences of the neighboring lands. As Ashoka embarked on his mission to spread Buddhism beyond India, the Eastern Greeks had broken away from the Seleucid Empire and established the Greco-Bactrian Kingdom in 256 BC. When the Buddhist mission arrived, it achieved immediate success and gained many followers. Yet, as Buddhism flourished in the north, things were different in the south. 50 years after Ashoka's passing, the Maurya Empire crumbled. The new rulers, hostile to Buddhism, forced many Buddhists to flee north to the Greco-Bactrian Kingdom. In response to this persecution of Buddhism, the Greco-Bactrian king Demetrius I led his army into India in 186 BC, conquering the Indus Valley. Yet, as Demetrius ventured deeper into northern India, a rival Eastern Greek leader, Eucrates I, seized the opportunity to overthrow him. The once unified kingdom fractured into two distinct realms, the Greco-Bactrian kingdom in the north and the Indo-Greek kingdom in the south. Following my time in Kujang, I continued my journey south to Dushanbe and Horgan Tepa, two very important cities that will play a significant role in later episodes. From Horgan Tepa, I continued my journey to Kolob, my fourth city in Tajikistan. Now here's the thing about Tajikistan. No fancy trains like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Just a bunch of rickety old rattle traps tracking their way up mountains. So what do you do if you want to get around in Tajikistan? Well, you head to the ultimate solution to all problems, the bazaar, where dreams are made and deals are done. Every bazaar has a section where you can find drivers who make intercity trips daily. But you see, people here are all about carpooling. So it doesn't matter how early you arrive, if the car is not full, the driver is not gonna start the engine. So at the end of the day, it's really all about getting the timing right. And unfortunately, I never got the timing right. I was always the first to arrive. Sometimes I spent the entire morning waiting with the driver, watching the clock tick by for at least an hour before other passengers showed up. To make matters worse, it turned out that getting there early doesn't guarantee you the prime seats up front either, because those comfy spots are always reserved for older people and the ladies, who usually get there last. As for me, I would be put in the back seat to sweat it out. Sometimes cramming with a couple of Tajik kids, which was not too bad. But other times, I was crammed in with 3 big Tajiks. I swear I felt like a sardine in a tin. It wasn't just uncomfortable, it was a living nightmare, I tell you. Check this out. This is gonna be my taxi to Dushanbe. And this is going to be my seat.
right here, and that is my bag with all of my important footage. Yeah, what could possibly go wrong?
Oh, by the way, if you are like me carrying a suitcase that happens to contain a lot of expensive filming gear, well, get ready for a shock. Your precious cargo will be strapped to the roof of the car, along with many other things. All kinds of things, really. Boxes, carpets, cotton, and believe it or not, one time I even found a helpless sheep up there. A sheep. And once your stuff is up there, it's up there. There ain't a thing you can do about it. You might as well say a prayer and hope for the best.
So far, so good. It's still right there. Okay, I'm not too worried. $150 away from Horgan Tepe, across all these mountains, is Kulob, a city deep in southern Tajikistan, closer to Afghanistan than the nation's capital, Dushanbe. So in the Hellenistic period, Kulob was part of the Greco-Bactrian kingdom. And as you can see, all this behind me, you can still find some traces of the Mediterranean architecture style. Не помню, русский чуть-чуть.
Откуда?
Китай?
Да. No, no, no.
No, 你好.
你好.
你好. Yeah, there we go.
你好，你好。
очень хорошо. Yeah.
请祝你好。
Красивее.
Это красиво.
Красиво, дом.
Это не красиво, там красивее.
Там красиво?
Там лучше это.
Да. Хорошо.
Там снимай вот там, под стороной. Очень красиво. Красивый.
Да. Salam alaikum. This is my filming condition, and all these kids all over me. Just absolutely difficult to film something here. Just all these kids from, I think, from age of 8 or 9 to 12, 13, and just wherever I go, they follow. Walking around in the neighborhoods of Kulob really reminds me of the time I spent in Naples, Italy. You see all this clothes hanging from the building, kids playing football, babushkas chatting. And speaking of Italy, check this out. Milano, there's a store called Milano in the center of Kulob. How fun.
In 2004, an inscription was discovered in Kulob, dating back to 2nd century BC. It offered a glimpse into a long-forgotten world. The inscription records a Greek named Herodotus. He dedicated a fire altar to Hestia, the Greek goddess of herds, a symbol of home and family. The inscription also mentions King Demetrius I, the one who conquered the Indus Valley, and his father, King Euthydemus. For over 2 centuries, the Eastern Greeks ruled over these vast territories, forging a unique blend of Greek and Indian cultures. For instance, I saw this one coin in the National Museum of Tajikistan. On one side of the coin, you can find the face of a Greek king wearing an Indian war elephant scalp. There are many such coins unearthed in this region with different kings wearing elephant scalps. The tusk, the trunk, every detail is meticulously captured, as the elephant scalp was a token of the Indian conquest. And on the other side of the coin, you can always find an image of Heracles, the greatest of the Greek heroes. In the Hellenistic world, Heracles was more than just a myth. He was the symbol of legitimacy. Yet, perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Eastern Greeks is this: the sculpture of Buddha. Before the conversion of the Eastern Greeks, Buddha was often represented through symbols such as an empty throne, the Bodhi tree, Buddha footprints, and the Dhammachakra. Because early Buddhists strictly banned any human representation of the Buddha, as the Buddha himself was against idol worship and saw it as a form of attachment. However, the Eastern Greeks, probably not feeling bound by these restrictions and probably because they were obsessed with form, are believed to have been the first to sculpt the Buddha. This is a 2nd century panel sculpture found in Pakistan. If you zoom in right here and look closely, you can even see Heracles acting as the Buddha's guardian. It was this human-like portrayal of the Buddha that would shape the canon of the Buddhist art for centuries to come. The Greco-Bactrian kingdom fell in 120 BC. The Indo-Greek kingdom lasted much longer and fell in 10 AD. After the last Greek rulers had vanished, the Buddhist faith continued to thrive for the next 600 years and found its way to the east. At the time, Persians and Eastern Greeks had established trade routes to the west for centuries. But this route was only half functional in terms of the transmission of goods and culture, because huge mountains, deserts, and nomads still blocked the route to the east. However, this was about to change. The gate to the east was about to swing open, welcoming a new force from the other side of the mountains. To discuss the gate to the east, we must first take some time to examine this strange-looking Chinese province, Gansu. It has a giant head and a giant tail, but a remarkably narrow waist. From above, it might seem an anomaly, a geographical oddity, but descend to the ground, and the reason for this slender middle becomes clear. To the north, the Mongolian plateau stretches out, a vast, unforgiving expanse. To the south, the Tibetan plateau rises, a rugged, inhospitable land. Between these two formidable barriers lies a narrow passage, the Hexi Corridor, the only conduit connecting China proper to the west. Since time immemorial, control of this corridor has been crucial for Chinese civilization. When nomads held this passage, they had the power to threaten China's heartland. Conversely, when the Chinese controlled it, they had access to the vast, rich lands of the West. So when we talk about the gate to the east, what we are really talking about is this enduring struggle between the Chinese and the nomads for the dominance of the Hexi Corridor. Around 200 BC, one formidable nomadic confederation known as the Xiongnu emerged. Their power sweeping across the steppe, this rise to dominance set off two chain reactions among their two neighbors, one in the nomadic Yuezhi Confederation to the west, and another in the sedentary Chinese Han Empire to the south. The first chain reaction happened in 176 BC, when the Xiongnu forces decisively defeated the Yuezhi forces. This shattering blow fractured the Yuezhi into two groups, the Lesser Yuezhi and the Greater Yuezhi. While the Lesser Yuezhi mostly retreated to the Tibetan plateau and Tibetanized, the Greater Yuezhi began migrating west. They first fought their way into the Yili Valley in 176 BC. From there, the Greater Yuezhi continued their westward trek. In 155 BC, they established a foothold in Transoxiana, a region that would become their home for the next 2 decades. However, their migration didn't end there. Around 135 BC, the Greater Yuezhi pushed southward, eventually reaching the Eastern Greek kingdoms. The Greater Yuezhi overthrew the Greco-Bactrian kingdom in 120 BC, and about 130 years later, they also brought an end to the Indo-Greek kingdom. In 30 AD, they established the Kushan Empire, which brought Central Asia and northern India under control, ushering in a period of peace for over 200 years. Unlike the nomadic Yuezhi Confederation who could always relocate when things got difficult, the Chinese Empire didn't really have that option. So ever since it was defeated by the Xiongnu in 200 BC, The Han Empire had been forced to pay an annual tribute and offer its princesses in marriage to the Xiongnu. But despite these concessions, the Xiongnu raids continued without any signs of stopping. This situation persisted for 60 years, until 141 BC, when the 7th emperor of the Han Empire, the 15-year-old Emperor Wu, ascended to the throne, which triggered the second chain reaction. Because unlike all his predecessors who had a passive foreign policy towards the Xiongnu, the young emperor vowed to remove this northern threat permanently. He was like, enough is enough. I'm gonna put an end to this bully. To defeat the Xiongnu once and for all, Emperor Wu made many plans, and the success of one plan plus the failure of another plan led to the formation of the Silk Road. The first plan was quite straightforward to strengthen the Chinese army and launch war against the Xiongnu. The second plan, however, was much more complicated and in many ways a gamble. The young emperor wanted to team up with the greater Yuezhi to fight the Xiongnu. It's the enemy of my enemies, my friends sort of alliance. But to realize this plan, he kind of need to send someone to find the greater Yuezhi first. So in 139 BC, during the early stage of the Han-Xiongnu War, the 17-year-old emperor sent an envoy named Zhang Qian to do just that. However, Zhang Qian's mission took 13 years and was a total disaster. At that time, Hexi Corridor was under Xiongnu's control and was literally a road of no return for the Chinese. Zhang was quickly captured by the Xiongnu and spent 10 years in captivity. When he finally escaped and got a chance to speak with the greater Yuezhi leaders in Transoxiana, they declined his offer of alliance. However, Zhang's journey was not entirely in vain because he spent about a year exploring the western lands before heading back. On his journey, he saw wonders, peoples, and goods completely different from China and established diplomatic relations with several city-states. Upon his return to China in 126 BC, Zhang brought back invaluable knowledge of the West. 11 years later, in 115 BC, Emperor Wu sent Zhang Qian to find allies again, and he failed again. But this time he brought home some horses from the Fergana Valley. Emperor Wu liked those horses a lot and believed they were the key to defeating the Xiongnu army. During Zhang Qian's long absence, Chinese forces underwent a dramatic transformation. In 119 BC, the Xiongnu were decisively defeated and pushed beyond the Gobi Desert. For the first time in history, the Hexi Corridor was under firm Chinese control. Emboldened by these military successes and driven by a desire for the legendary Fergana horses, Emperor Wu marched his army deep into the west in 111 BC. After 2 wars against the city-states of the Fergana Valley, the Han Empire established its dominance in the region by 101 BC. This victory paved the way for regular diplomatic exchanges between the Han Empire and the West, marking the official birth of the Silk Road. Under the rule of the Han Empire, trade along the Silk Road thrived rapidly. There was a massive exchange of goods, culture, and technology. And when silk from the East was becoming extremely popular in the West, Buddhism from the West was becoming extremely popular in the East. The Han Empire fell in 220 AD and led to a period of chaos that lasted 400 years. Fear and unrest gripped the land. People needed solace and salvation more than ever. In this climate of uncertainty, Buddhism quickly dominated the Silk Road and took root in China. Along with Buddhism came Buddhist art, architecture, and sculptures. They all gained enormous popularity along the Silk Road, captivating the hearts and minds of countless travelers and merchants. But all of that paled in comparison to what happened next. Because you see, at some point in the 4th and 5th century, all the Buddhist countries across the Silk Road started building this. Enormous cave complexes with enormous Buddha statues. The concept of sanctuary caves originated in India They were used for meditation, teaching, and summer retreats. There are still about 1,000 Buddhist caves in India, but most of them are just caves. A few hundred years later, the Eastern Greeks added their own artistic flair and began crafting the statues of Buddha. But they didn't make them too big. Then, another couple hundred years later, in the time of chaos, the rulers along the Silk Road became extremely wealthy through trade. They were so rich that they combined the Indian tradition of caves with the Greek innovation of statues and built these giant Buddhas in even gianter caves. This trend was to continue for over 1,000 years, and the statues were undeniably brilliant. When most people speak about the giant Buddha period, they mean the era of the truly huge Buddhas. It was a certain level of spectacle that made Buddhism truly famous, even to those with no interest in religion. In China alone, there are dozens of these Buddhist caves perfectly aligned with the Silk Road. To give you an idea of the sheer scale of these monumental works, I visited one in Shanxi province.
You should start calling me that too.
Hello viewers, this is Yungang Grottos, one of the 3 most important Chinese Buddhist sculpture sites. This place is extremely important in many ways. First off, it is very old. Most of the Buddha statues you see in this place are at least 1,500 years old. The oldest ones have been sitting here for over 1,600 years. Secondly, the amount of Buddha statues in this place is just staggering. There are 53 major caves, 1,100 minor caves, and 51,000 niches. Lastly, and most importantly, these grottos represent the successful fusion of Buddhist religious symbolic art from South and Central Asia with Chinese cultural traditions that can only be found along the Silk Road and nowhere else.
Yet among all these Buddhist caves, the most famous and magnificent is hands down the 2 Buddha statues of Bamiyan in Afghanistan. According to carbon dating, the smaller of the 2, the Eastern Buddha, was built in 570 AD. It was a golden age for Buddhism as tens of thousands of pilgrims flocked to pay their respects before this towering 38-meter-tall Buddha. However, as fate would have it, this era of Buddhist glory was short-lived, for in that same year, 570 AD, a boy was born in the Arabian Peninsula. His birth marked the beginning of a religious revolution that would forever alter the landscape of the 7 Stans. His name was Muhammad. He was the founder of Islam. So I thought I had seen it all in Kujang. I'd already seen the rat swimming in the Citadalia, college kids speaking Chinese like it was their native tongue, and the ruins of Alexandria Ashkante. But no, Kujang had one more trick up its sleeve. Imagine my surprise when I stumbled upon this Capitoline wolf. How the heck did this end up in Central Asia?
See the she-wolf and the 2 babies.
It tells a story about the founding of Rome. But I'm in northern Tajikistan. It's just fascinating how far the Mediterranean culture goes. All the way to northern Tajikistan. You know, cross the Black Sea, cross the Caspian Sea, cross the Alara Sea, to here, in northern Tajikistan, next to Pamirs, next to Hindu Kush. This is incredible. Look at the babies. Look at that she-wolf. The founding of Rome can be found in northern Tajikistan. Incredible. Absolutely incredible.
The Capital Lion Wolf statue may seem a bit out of place in this part of the world, but a mural of the sculpture was discovered in Tajikistan. The reason the Capital Lion Wolf can be found in Tajikistan is because this region, Transoxiana, was the heart of the Silk Road. Since ancient times, it had been a major trade hub and was inhabited by a northeastern Iranian group known as Sogdians. The Sogdians lived in city-states. Although they were never politically united, they controlled trade routes between East and West. After the Silk Road was formed, the Sogdians played an essential part as middlemen. Sogdian merchants and diplomats traveled as far west as the Eastern Roman Empire, which explained why this was here. They also traveled as far east as China, where they established a large community. However, the prosperity of Transoxiana would prove to be its own curse. As the 7th century dawned, these wealthy city-states found themselves at the center of a geopolitical storm. 4 formidable empires emerged in Eurasia, each casting a covetous eye upon this lucrative region. Transoxiana became a battleground, a pawn in the ruthless games of these rival powers. The Sogdians, caught in the crossfire, were forced to witness their homeland transformed into a tragic theater of war. One day in 610 AD, when Muhammad was 40 years old, a momentous event occurred. In a secluded cave near Mecca, the Archangel Gabriel appeared to him, bearing the divine revelations of Allah. 3 years later, in 613 AD, Muhammad began to preach his message to the people of Mecca. His teachings, rooted in the principles of monotheism, compassion, and justice, resonated with many, but also faced fierce opposition. Yet, despite facing persecution and hardship, Muhammad's followers began to grow. 5 years into his prophetic mission, Muhammad turned 48 years old. Meanwhile, across the vast expanse of Asia in Bamiyan, next to the 38-meter Eastern Buddha, the larger 55-meter Western Buddha was being constructed. This year, 618 AD, also marked a pivotal moment in the history of East Asia. After 4 centuries of turmoil and instability, 2 formidable empires, the Tang and the Tibetan, emerged from the chaos. The Mongolian plateau, on the other hand, also saw the rise of a new power, the Turks. In the early 7th century, they established 2 Turkic regimes, the Eastern Turkic Khaganate and the Western Turkic Khaganate. In 620, the Eastern Turks made their first move. They invaded the newborn empire in the south but were defeated within a decade. Then the Tang Empire began to take the initiative. It expanded rapidly westward. By 640, all city-states in the Tarim Basin had submitted. By 657, the Western Turks had submitted. By 659, much of the Fergana Valley, Transoxiana, and Eastern Khorasan had all fallen under Tang rule. Meanwhile, in the southwest, the Tibetan Empire also flourished. When we think about Tibet nowadays, the first thing that comes to our mind is usually Tibetan Buddhism. Lamas, pagodas, monasteries, and pious Tibetans who don't mind doing this for years. But Tibet wasn't always like that. Before the comprehensive Buddhification of Tibet, the Tibetans were known as some of the best warriors in the world. They had a powerful empire and a strong army. At its peak in the late 8th to the mid-9th century, all these lands submitted to the Tibetan Empire. Many remain under Tibetan influence today, over 1,000 years after the empire's fall. Anyway, after seeing how the Tang Empire benefited from the Silk Road, the Tibetans also wanted to get involved. They established the first presence in Central Asia in 656 and spent the next century competing with the Tang Empire to control this vital trade route. But this race to the center was not a 2-horse contest. Over time, 2 other formidable players emerged, the Turks and the Arabs. You see, following the collapse of the Turkic Khaganates, many Turkic tribes, including the Turkish, Karluks, and Uyghurs, declared independence and also sought to carve out their own territories along the Silk Road. Meanwhile, In the West, Islam spread rapidly and intertwined with Arab military expansion. Within a decade of the Prophet Muhammad's death in 632, Arab armies had conquered the Levant and Egypt. Another 10 years later, Mesopotamia and Persia fell. By 651, the Muslim troops had reached the bank of Ahmadiyya. For the next 120 years, these four powers tore the heart of the Silk Road into pieces. In the early phase, the Tang and Tibetan forces were evenly matched and allied themselves with different Turkic tribes and Sogdian city-states. The Arab conquest, on the other hand, was interrupted by 3 civil wars and 2 regime changes. Whenever the Arab forces made some progress, they were called back to fight the civil war. But interestingly, unlike most nations that were usually weakened by the civil wars, the Arabs came back stronger each time, and the situation in Central Asia was also more favorable to them than when they left. Upon their return from the Second Civil War in 705, both the Tang and Tibetan forces had been significantly weakened by the other side. In the north, the 2 dominant Turkic regimes had also been fighting each other for decades, depleting their strength. The Arabs took advantage of the situation, reorganized their army, and advanced quickly. They crossed Ahmadiyya, crossed the Sidi Dalia, and reached the Fergana Valley in just 5 years, conquering everything in between. By 710, the Arabs were competing with the Tang army head-on in the Fergana Valley. Initially, the Tang army defeated the Arabs twice, once in 715 and once in 717. But over the next 30 years, under constant attack from the Turks and the Tibetans, the Tang troops lost their influence in the region. In 751, the Tang army was betrayed by its Turkic allies and was shattered by the Arab army at the Talas River. This defeat marked the beginning of the Tang Empire's decline. 4 years later, in the winter of 755, a pair of Tang generals, An Lushan and Shi Siming, both of mixed Sogdian and Turkic heritage, launched a rebellion that plunged the Tang Empire into an 8-year civil war. The Arab and Turkic mercenaries and the Tibetan army took advantage of Tang's weakness and plundered city after city. When the conflict was finally over, North China was in ruins. The Tang Empire, once a beacon of power and prosperity, was irrevocably damaged. In 790, the Tibetans seized the opportunity and dealt a decisive blow to the remaining Tang forces in the Tarim Basin. This victory signaled Tang's complete abandonment of its western territories. For the next millennium until the mid-18th century, China would be absent from the lands west of the Hexi Corridor. However, the Tang Empire was not alone in its decline. By the 860s, the Arabs had lost much of their influence in Central Asia. The Tibetans, too, faced their own internal struggles. The 300 years of Buddhification divided Tibetan society, leading to a devastating civil war between pro-Buddhist and anti-Buddhist factions. And in 877, the Tibetan Empire collapsed. Exactly 30 years later, in 907, the Tang Empire also collapsed. The decentralized Turks, on the other hand, were the ones that persisted until the very end. They flooded into this political vacuum and changed the demographics of the Tarim Basin, the Fergana Valley, Transoxiana, the Eurasian Steppe, and the Caucasus. In their new territories, the Turks found themselves surrounded by 2 powerful forces, the Persians and Islam. This fateful encounter would spark a unique and transformative fusion, a tripartite symbiosis that would reshape not only their own destinies, but also the very course of history.